you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Roadkill is what we're talking about, and some interesting research that has been done in Limpopo, and it's a massive problem, as you can hear from the callers. Dr. Harriet Davies-Mostert is my guest in the studio. We were just touching earlier, and you mentioned the different kinds of species that are being affected, but we haven't touched on reptiles, and I have seen snakes crossing tar roads in the middle of summer.
Yeah, snakes are very vulnerable to road mortality, especially in the summer when it gets warm and they go and lie on these roads, especially the not quite so busy roads. And so while they're basking out there, they're very vulnerable to being hit. And Wendy's initial survey showed that 45 flat-necked chameleons were hit on that stretch in those 40 days that she did, and 19 Mozambique spitting cobras. And this is particularly concerning because these animals are very long-lived, they grow slowly, this could have very big impacts on their populations, and the unfortunate thing is we just don't know.
Is anybody correlating this information with, with actual counts of animals and what species are doing? I'm sure roadkill has an effect on this, a massive effect.
Absolutely, and you've hit the nail on the head. That's got to be where we go from here. I think the original part of this study was to simply try and get an idea of the rate at which roadkill was happening and to perhaps expand it to elsewhere in the country. But the next step has to be to perhaps pick a couple of very priority species and say, what is this mortality from roadkill, and is it having an impact? Is it reducing the populations of these species and or changing their distribution because they're basically getting weeded out by the cars and the vehicles that drive along these roads?
And what about their patterns? I would imagine that when a new road goes through an area, it must change the habits of these animals as well. That where they move, in which direction they move, and they've got this noise coming through in the middle of the night. All of these kind of factors must have an impact on animal movements as well.
Absolutely, and as I mentioned earlier, there's obviously the direct impacts of vehicle collisions, but all of these other secondary impacts are, we think, almost possibly as important as the direct impacts. If habitats are being fragmented around the country, this could have very serious long-term effects on wildlife populations.
Just looking at some of your SMSs, Peter says, stop the killing of animals, please. Jean says, hi, Aki and Dr. H. Might there be more animals on tarred roads in winter because of the radiated warmth, which you've just touched on as well? But I would imagine, like reptiles, for example, there are less reptiles in winter time that get onto the roads. But you often see, buck and these kind of animals just like to lie on the road because it's warm as well. An interesting one, and perhaps we can get Megan on the line. Megan is a road student. She sent us an SMS saying that currently doing my honours project on roadkill. Within a 10-day period, I found over 30 animals on a tar road near Grahamstown. I find new animals every day, ranging from mammals to birds to frogs to earthworms. So maybe we get Megan on the line to share some of that information, because that sounds absolutely fascinating. The research has been done just in Limpopo province at the moment. And this could be a great collaboration moving down to Grahamstown in that area. What about other provinces?
Well, actually, I failed to mention that Wendy is actually a student at Rhodes University, and her supervisor, Dr. Dan Parker, has become very interested in this topic. So I'm pretty sure that Megan is working quite closely with Dan, and the idea is to try and get a whole series of projects around the country going so that we can compare notes and use the same kind of protocols to collect the information. So it's great to hear Megan calling in.
Okay, well, that's great, because I think we've got Megan on the line. Hello, Megan, is that you?
Hello. Yes,
hi.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for calling us, but thank you for the SMS. Are you at Rhodes at the moment?
Yes, I am. I'm in the department working.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, we were just talking, and Harriet was just saying that you're probably in the same department as some of your fellow students who are conducting similar research?
Yes, I'm actually I'm in contact with Wendy at the moment, talking about what animals I'm finding and everything.
All right, now tell us about your research, because you mentioned it very briefly in your SMS.
Well, at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm using Wendy's protocol out here in Grahamstown, and I'm looking at if there's any seasonal effects between a dirt road and a tar road just outside Grahamstown. And so far, I've been finding quite a few animals.
Was this your first kind of research into roadkill?
Yes. No, it was actually I'm from Johannesburg, and during the holidays I've noticed many animals on the road, and it prompted me to look into this and to see if there were any mitigation efforts that we could put on these high-risk roads.
You know, the reason why I asked that, because when Harriet was telling me the numbers that Wendy has come up with, I was shocked at the number of roadkill that happens. Were you equally shocked? Because you said here in the last 10 hours you found over 30 animals. Just tell us about those animals, and were you also surprised at the high number of animals?
Yes, no, I was so surprised. And it was just 10 days, and I thought I wouldn't get anything really. I thought I was only going to get a few. But so far I've got things from many dickops, the spotted thickney birds. I've had mongooses, frogs, and a lot of the giant earthworms because of the rain we've had lately.
That is fascinating. Well, Megan, listen, thank you so much for the SMS, and before you go, just tell us what else you're going to be researching on. Are you planning to expand outside of your area?
Just for my honors project, no, I'm just going to be looking at the seasonal. So to see if there is a difference, like one of the callers was saying that there might be something different between the summer and winter. So I'm going to see if that does have an effect.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks very much for sharing that with us.
No, thank you.
Cheers. It's almost 2:45. I'm fascinated by this, and equally I'm shocked and mortified at the amount of roadkill that is going on. And if you're a driver, give us a call. Call us on 8830-702, or you can SMS us 31702. We'll continue taking your calls, and also keep us updated, please, with the power failures around Joburg. It appears to be quite a biggie. If you don't mind SMSing us the area which has been affected, and maybe there are some key intersections that are down as well. So where is there no power at the moment? How are you being affected? We'll continue our discussion about roadkill, and perhaps you might even have a suggestion on how do we improve and how do we bring down those numbers. What can we do to reduce it? Now, we know that the speed is one way that you can, effectively bring down the amount of roadkill, but there must be other methods. Perhaps what's been going on in other countries around the world, you might have been driving around in a national park elsewhere, and you've seen something interesting that you want to show. Joburg appears to be a biggie, extending from the south up towards Highlands North, the Hyde Park area, no power there. The Glen Shopping Centre closed because of the power failure, and SMS over here, so keep those SMSs coming in, and appreciate your input. We're talking about roadkill, and we're talking about how can we bring down those levels of roadkill. It's our green feature this week, and in the studio we have with us a very interesting research that has been done with regards to roadkill in South Africa, and Dr. Harriet Davies-Mostert in the studio, who's head of science and research at the Endangered Wildlife Trust. We spoke about the students at Rhodes that are doing the research. Are there any of the other universities involved in getting more information and getting more accurate statistics?
Well, I know that there have been quite a number of projects run under Graham Alexander at Wits University, particularly looking at reptiles. That's his special interest. And, I think as this issue becomes more in the forefront of people's minds, we're going to find a lot of new studies starting. There is a project that's just begun at the beginning of the year called Mammal Map, which is a project of the Animal Demography Unit at the University of Cape Town. And I know that they're very interested in getting information about roadkill as part of their project to basically develop an atlas of mammals around Africa. And it's quite an interesting thing, even though roadkill is terribly grisly and it's very morbid and we don't want mortality on roads, there is a silver lining to the cloud, because we can still learn something from roadkill. We know if a species gets killed along a certain stretch of road, then we know that is part of its distribution, and it helps us to understand a bit more about animal distributions.
Okay.
So even though it's a bit grisly, it's certainly very valuable information. So if members of the public want to report this kind of information in, it would be very useful.
But is there anything that can be done to reduce roadkill? You mentioned speed, which is obviously the obvious one, but surely there must be other ways at what we can do as humans to reduce roadkill.
Well, look, as you mentioned earlier, there's been a plethora of studies across the world looking at this issue, and a number of mitigation measures have been suggested, including things like making sure that the road verges are wide, and that they also don't have long grass, because dense vegetation encourages animals to go close to the edge of the road.
Okay.
And also, some of the early work that the EWT did on owls and along some of the highways, found that it's important not to have suitable sort of perching spots for things like owls, which then tend to sit over the road and then swoop down to get little rodents as they run over, and then of course they get hit by vehicles. So I think there's a lot of things we can do to change the physical characteristics of the road, and in some cases we just simply have to reduce the speed, and certainly in places like some of the parks that have been mentioned earlier, we simply have to put speed humps in and make sure that people stick to these minimum speed limits so that animals are protected.
And I'm also thinking now, we've got this incredible technology that we're using today. Virtually every single person's got a mobile phone. We're all connected somewhere or another. The power of collaboration, we've seen it when there are disasters around the world. And I came across, and anybody can Google this, the California Roadkill Observation System. And they've got a map of California. It's a Google map of California. And they've got these pins that have been put down across. And it's a map where all the roadkill has taken place. There's observations. There's even a photo gallery. And where people can actually report this. And I would imagine that could be something that we can look at, because today any message that you sent out is sent out with a location. I know that you can do it with Twitter, you can do it with Facebook, and you've got all of these people traveling on all these roads. Surely with technology today, we can build up an incredible database on what the state of roadkill is in South Africa.
Absolutely, and I think we have to take advantage of this resource that we have. Basically the citizens of the country. Citizen science is a growing field, particularly because of the technology that's now available, and it's a little matter to stop and take a photo. I think we must caution that people must be very careful, though. You're often on high-speed roads, and the last thing we want is people slamming on brakes, and there is definitely a human safety element to this whole thing, and that's why this project has been supported by a company like Bridgestone, which is obviously very cares a lot about the human angle as well. So I think that while we really do urge people to send in information, we need to just be careful about stopping on major highways.
Talking about this research and the ongoing research that you are doing at the Endangered Wildlife Trust, do you encourage the public to be actively involved with you and call in and send you emails and that kind of thing? Do you encourage that kind of thing? And if so, how does the public interact with you?
Well, absolutely. People that are interested, we would love to hear from them. I think, I mentioned the mammal map earlier from the ADU, and I think you can Google it and people will be able to find that relatively easily. That's a very formal way of submitting information. But if anybody wants to get hold of Wendy and to talk about the project or to identify some particularly high priority hotspots where they've seen a lot of roadkill or share their experiences, then they are very welcome to do so.
And we've just been touching on South Africa. I imagine that when you go up further north, there are hardly any statistics available, and that's equally a big problem the further north into Africa you go. I mean, roadkill, and there you're getting all sorts of other species as well.
Yeah, I think your listeners will be aware of the proposed Serengeti Highway that people have been fighting on and off for the last couple of years, which was basically a proposal to put a road straight through the Serengeti, and it would have cut off the migration of the wildebeest, and obviously there's been a huge backlash against that, and has raised the awareness of this issue, I think, far more widely than it used to be. But, we're really only touching the tip of the iceberg in terms of trying to understand what the threats to biodiversity there are from roads.
Dr. Harriet Davies-Mostert, give us those contact details again where people can get in touch with you guys.
All right. Well, our website is www.ewt.org.za. And Wendy Collinson's email address, she's the project executant, is wendyc@ewt.org.za.
EWT, hey?
That's right.
EWT.org.za. So that's where you can get hold of the Endangered Wildlife Trust. And, get involved is all I can say to you. I mean, we've got this incredible network of connected people on our roads in South Africa. Share that information. Let's help improve this terrible situation of roadkill that, this wildlife and these poor animals just being mowed down literally on our roads in South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
Enjoy
very
the rest
much.
of your Monday afternoon, and appreciate your time and input.
Thank you, Aki, and thanks for letting us have a chance to get this message out to everybody.
Keep up the good work. Dr. Harriet Davies-Mostert, Head of Science and Research at the Endangered Wildlife Trust.